The light always froze at 3:14 a.m. A perfect beam locked over the dark water, like it was staring at something. The strangest part wasn't the malfunction. It was what blinked back. I was assigned to the Crofts Point Lighthouse last November, a lonely structure perched on a spit of jagged stone off the Maine coast. I'd been a Coast Guard technician for 6 years, but this was my first solo posting. The tower hadn't been manned in decades. The new automation system was supposed to make everything foolproof. All I had to do was monitor, maintain, and report. Easy money, or so I thought. The place felt wrong the second I stepped inside. It wasn't anything obvious, just this heaviness in the air. Damp, cold stone that smelled of salt and oil. Wind that never really stopped. The kind of silence that made you feel like someone else was holding their breath with you. The first 2 nights were quiet. I spent them reading old logbooks and listening to the waves slam the rocks below. Then, on the 3rd night, at exactly 3:14 a.m., the beam froze. The rotation motor was supposed to keep the light moving in perfect intervals. Smooth, constant motion. But that night it just stopped. The lens locked onto one spot out at sea, maybe 2 miles off the coast. I checked the control panel. No error lights, no power surge. Everything was normal, except it wasn't. When I looked through the glass, I could see the beam fixed over open water, illuminating the waves in long, shimmering streaks. The ocean there looked darker, heavier, like it was swallowing the light. The next morning, I called it in. The response was casual. Probably salt corrosion. Clean the contacts. I did. Scrubbed the gears, checked the wiring, replaced the relay. But that night at 3:14, the same thing happened. The light froze, aimed at the same stretch of sea. I decided to time it, see how long it lasted. Exactly 2 minutes and 41 seconds. Then, without warning, the rotation resumed like nothing had happened. I told myself it was coincidence, a mechanical hiccup. But when I looked through the scope that 3rd night, something caught my eye. Out where the light hit the water, something reflected back. At first, I thought it was debris, maybe a buoy or a drifting barrel. But it flickered. Not randomly either. It blinked. Once, twice, 3 times. A pause, then again. Like Morse code. I didn't sleep. I just sat at the desk waiting for dawn, the wind howling through the cracks in the stone. The next day, I went digging through the archives, old maritime reports, local legends, anything about the area. That S when I found it, a ship called the Halberd had gone down 20 years earlier, almost exactly 2 miles offshore. 27 souls lost, none recovered. The Coast Guard report blamed an engine fire and rough seas. But what caught my attention was the time of the sinking. 3:14 a.m. That night I couldn't help myself. When the beam froze again, I trained the binoculars on the black spot the light refused to leave. There was something there, something pale just beneath the surface. It looked like fabric at first, twisting with the current. But then it moved against the tide. Slowly, deliberately, and it blinked. 2 faint glimmers of light beneath the waves, perfectly spaced. Eyes reflecting the beam back at me. I stumbled backward, knocking over the chair. When I looked again, the light had resumed its rotation as if nothing happened. I stopped logging the incident reports after that. There didn't seem to be a point. Nobody would believe me. Still, I couldn't stop watching. Each night, the beam froze in the same direction. Sometimes I thought I saw faces in the water rising just enough for the light to catch them, pale, bloated faces staring up through the surface before the rotation began again. Then came the night the tower went completely dark. No power surge, no storm, no malfunction. One moment the beacon was turning. The next, total blackness. The sound of the waves stopped. The wind stopped. Even the sea seemed to hold still. And then faintly from far out in the dark came a flash. 3 blinks. Pause. 3 more. It was answering itself. When the lights came back on, the beam was already moving again, sweeping over an empty ocean. I convinced myself it was exhaustion, isolation playing tricks. But the next morning, when I went down to the shoreline, I found something tangled in the rocks below the cliff. A life jacket. It was waterlogged and faded, but the name was still legible on the back. The Halberd. I radioed it in, but the reply never came. Only static. That was 3 nights ago. The light still freezes at 3:14 every morning. The reflection still blinks back. And sometimes when I stand by the window, I swear I can hear something beneath the waves. Muffled, rhythmic knocks rising through the stone foundation, like someone trying to get out. They said the place had been empty for years, but on my first night inside the tower, I heard footsteps above me. Slow, deliberate, circling the empty room that shouldn't exist. I told myself it was the sea wind, but deep down, I already knew someone never left this lighthouse. When the Coast Guard reopened Marrow Point Lighthouse, I volunteered before I even thought it through. I'd done a few coastal assignments before, but something about this place intrigued me. It stood alone on a jagged cliff, a good 30 miles from the nearest town, reachable only by a winding dirt road that half flooded whenever the tide swelled too high. The structure was beautiful in a lonely way. Whitewashed stone, rusted railing, the smell of salt and rot clinging to everything. Inside, everything creaked. The floorboards, the metal stairs, the walls themselves seemed to sigh. I tried to tell myself it was normal for a building that had spent a decade bracing against storms. Still, the silence between the wind gusts felt wrong, like the place was holding its breath. My quarters were on the 3rd level just beneath the lantern room. That's what made it strange. There was no floor above me, just the trapdoor to the beacon chamber. But that first night around 1 a.m., I heard the steps. They started faint, somewhere near the top of the tower, pacing in a slow circle. I froze in bed, staring at the ceiling. 1, 2, 3 steps. A pause. Then another set, heavier this time, dragging slightly like boots soaked in seawater. I climbed up to the lantern room the next morning, expecting to find maybe a loose beam or a nesting gull. Nothing. The glass was cracked in places, the metal railing bent, but no sign of any creature or person that could have made those noises. I tried to laugh it off, but the footsteps came again the following night, always at the same time, always the same slow, deliberate rhythm. I'd started leaving my radio on just to drown them out, but the static only seemed to make them clearer, like the tower itself wanted me to listen. On the 4th night, I brought my flashlight and waited by the trapdoor. The air up there was colder, the wind sharp enough to sting my face. When the sound started again, it wasn't above me, it was behind me. Someone was pacing on my level now. I spun around, light cutting across the room, catching nothing but dust and old paint. The steps stopped the instant I moved. For a full minute there was silence, then 3 slow knocks against the wall, spaced apart, deliberate. I reported it the next day to command. They said I was probably hearing thermal expansion, metal shifting as it cooled at night. Sure, metal that walked and knocked. That night, I locked the hatch leading to the lantern room. It was a heavy steel latch, it hadn't been touched in years. I pressed my ear against it before bed. Nothing. Just the wind outside and the waves below. Then, click. The latch lifted from the other side. I jumped up and yanked the trapdoor open, shining the beam into the lantern room. It was empty, but the smell hit me. Wet rope, salt, and something faintly metallic like rusted blood. The beam of my flashlight cut across the floor and caught footprints, bare, damp prints leading in a circle around the light housing. They stopped directly above where my bed sat. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning I went through the old logbooks, stored in a drawer beneath the desk. The last entry was dated August 4th, 1986. The handwriting was jagged, written in pencil that had dug through the paper. Storms here, can't get word through. Light keeps turning itself back on after I shut it down. Something moving up there, something that doesn't cast a shadow. There was no follow-up entry. That night I tried one last thing. I switched off the beacon manually and waited by the window. The ocean was still, black as oil. For a few minutes nothing happened. Then slowly, the light above me began to turn, its reflection sweeping across the rocks like an unblinking eye. When I climbed to the top again, the lantern controls were untouched. But in the glass just beyond my reflection, I saw a man standing behind me. He was soaked to the bone, skin pale and blistered from salt. His uniform looked like mine, but older, sun-bleached and torn. His mouth moved, whispering words I couldn't hear through the wind. Then, the light went out. I stumbled down the stairs in the dark, heart hammering. But the tower seemed endless now. I could hear him following. Those same dragging steps, closer every turn. When I finally burst through the front door, dawn was breaking. I looked back once, just once. The lantern was turning again, though no one was up there. They reassigned me a week later. I didn't argue, but sometimes, when I'm on night watch along the coast, I see Marrow Point in the distance. The light still sweeps across the water, steady, perfect circles. And if you look close enough, there's always a figure standing beside it.